the village whispered about Sandra's face. It was a beauty too sharp, too luminous for the thin soil and humble wooden houses of their compound. It was the kind of beauty that promised kingdoms but demanded a price. Her parents, Mr. Okafor and Mama Sandra, did not see a queen, they saw a ladder. They were two worn figures, a tired carpenter and a determined vegetable seller, who had emptied their small lives into a single, precious fund, Sandra's education. Every naira was a sacrifice, every prayer a plea that their daughter would be the one to break the curse of poverty. They had sold their last piece of land and endured the ridicule of neighbors to get her admission to the university. They had used debt, long hours, and sweat. Her skin was smooth and fair, her figure perfectly curved, and her eyes held a brightness that turned heads in the dusty village market. It was a beauty that seemed too expensive for their humble home, like a diamond set in worn brass. Mr. Okafor, her father, was a carpenter. He was a thin man whose eyes always looked tired, eyes that had seen too many sunrises from the bench and too many sunsets covered in sawdust. Every day, he came home with the smell of wood and fatigue clinging to his wrapper. Her mother, whom everyone called Mama Sandra, sold vegetables in the crowded section of the market. They were poor, but they had one shared, powerful belief: Sandra would change their story. They had struggled for 17 years just to keep her in secondary school. When it was time for university, the struggle grew into a kind of war. Mr. Okafor sold the small piece of land behind their house, the plot where Mama Sandra had hoped to plant yams. Mama Sandra endured endless meetings with the women's cooperative, borrowing money and swallowing the cutting insults of neighbors who mocked their ambition. What is this university fever for a girl? She will just cook for a man later, one neighbor had scoffed. Mama Sandra never fought back with words. She fought with work. She just tightened her headscarf and focused on her vegetable stall, her back aching, her hands raw. The university was their exit, the only path out of the perpetual cycle of poverty that held them hostage. When Sandra finally secured admission to study mass communication in the big city, the entire compound celebrated. It was a victory not just for her, but for every sacrifice her parents had made. Mama Sandra danced a clumsy, joyful dance. Tears streamed down her face as she shouted, "My daughter go be big woman. She go speak on radio." The moment was heavy with emotion. Sandra stood in the middle of their small, low-ceiling room, looking at her father's tired smile and her mother's worn hands. She felt the weight of their expectations settle on her shoulders. It was a burden, but it was also a shield. "I will make you proud, Mama," Sandra promised, her voice clear and earnest. "I will finish. I will get a good job. You will never sell vegetables in the market again." She meant it then. She packed her few clothes, mostly second-hand, and the single, tattered suitcase that had belonged to her father. Mr. Okafor gave her a small roll of cash, a significant portion of their savings. It felt hot and precious in her hand. On the day she left, the village gathered to watch. Sandra hugged her parents tightly, promising to call every week. As the rusty bus pulled away, she looked back at them standing together, two small, worn figures waving until they faded into the distance. She carried their hope, their trust, and their poverty with her. She was going to the city to be transformed. The long bus ride was filled with nervous excitement. Sandra imagined herself in lecture halls, dressed in smart clothes, talking about global affairs. She never imagined that the world was about to see her beauty, and that her beauty would completely redefine her ambition. She was ready to be a student, but the city was ready to make her a queen, the glamour of the new life. The university campus was a world away from her village. It was a place of paved roads, brightly colored clothing, and constant, throbbing energy. Sandra arrived at the crowded, unpainted hostel room, dumped her suitcase, and felt a sudden wave of disappointment. The room was hot and too small, designed for 4 girls but currently housing 6. It felt local, exactly what she had promised her parents she would escape. But outside that door, a different world existed. In lectures, men whispered her name. In the cafeteria, eyes followed her every move. Sandra's innate beauty, which had been celebrated in the village, became currency here. Her fair, smooth skin and graceful figure made her stand out among thousands of students. She quickly learned that a smile from her could open doors faster than a good grade. By her second year, Sandra no longer felt that the hostel was acceptable. It felt beneath her. Her clothes were too plain, her location too humble. The noise and the smell of cheap cooking oil annoyed her. She confided in a few of her new, flashier friends. They were already living off campus, sponsored by various admirers. It sounded easy, lucrative, and far more glamorous than mass communication. Soon, Sandra had her own admirer, a young man with a fast car and an easy smile. He rented her a fine apartment off campus, far from the noise and the shared bathrooms of the hostel. Another admirer bought her a brand new phone, sleek and modern, which she used to take endless selfies. Sandra's life changed rapidly. She started painting her nails bright colors and scrolling through messages from men who offered trips, money, and gifts. She was living like a small queen, a life her parents could not have even imagined. Mama Sandra still called, her voice tinged with worry. "Sandra, you day okay? You still day read your book?" Sandra would paint on a sweet, confident tone. "Yes, Mama, I day fine. Everything is going well," she would answer, even as she looked at a new designer bag resting on her velvet sofa. The lie was easy, a small price to pay for this new freedom. Her parents' dream of a hardworking graduate was slowly being overshadowed by the reality of a material girl. She started spending the money given to her without a second thought. She bought expensive wigs, high-heeled shoes, and fashionable dresses. The shame she initially felt about lying to her mother was replaced by the thrill of her rising status. She belonged to the crowd that went to the best clubs, the crowd that drove cars, the crowd that mattered. This was the life she was meant to have. She felt powerful, admired, and free from the limitations of her past. She had forgotten the promises she had made. She did not know that this glamorous new life was a trap, and that the bitter lesson her parents had always feared was just around the corner. She was running toward a sweetness that would eventually become her punishment. The turning point came at a friend's wedding in Enugu. Sandra was dressed in an intricate lace gown, one of the many gifts she had received. She carried herself with the air of royalty, accepting the whispers and stares as her due. It was there she met Chief Obi. He was a big man, both in size and status, but very local. Chief Obi was a successful businessman who made his money in palm oil and timber. He owned trucks, shops, and houses, and people in his community showed him deep respect. But he did not fit into Sandra's new, polished world. Chief Obi always wore a simple, traditional wrapper and slippers. His belly was big, his laughter loud enough to shake a whole room, and his English was noticeably broken. His skin often shone from a slight sheen of oil. He was 40-something, single, and had never been married. He was the kind of man Sandra's sophisticated friends dismissed as old school. "Babe, now this man you day follow?" her friend Ngozi teased, watching Chief Obi laugh boisterously from across the hall. Sandra laughed, tossing her new wig. "Habeg, I'm just eating his money. I can never marry that one." But Chief Obi had what she needed most, money and plenty of it. He adored her with an unreserved, uncomplicated love. He was smitten the moment he saw her. To him, Sandra was the most beautiful woman he had ever encountered, and he treated her like a treasure. He showered her with gifts. A new gold earring set, a closet full of expensive wigs, and even a small car. He paid her rent without complaint and made sure her refrigerator was always full. "Sandra, my baby, I no fit let you suffer," he told her, his voice sincere. "I will give you everything you deserve." Sandra accepted it all with a sweet, practiced smile. She enjoyed the good life, the constant flow of money, and the security it offered. She continued to post pictures online, cultivating the image of a successful, carefree young woman. She was a master of the double life, telling her friends one thing while taking everything Chief Obi offered. Chief Obi, blinded by his deep affection, never suspected that her feelings were purely transactional. He saw her smile and believed it was real. He saw her gratitude and believed it was love. He was ready to settle down, and he believed Sandra was the right woman, the one he had waited for. Her life was smooth, shining, and sweet. She had traded her future for the present, and for a while, the trade seemed worth it. She was Chief Obi's small queen, ruling over the comforts his money provided. But deep down, she still held a secret irritation, a small, constant resentment that he was not the polished, modern man she truly desired. This resentment was a ticking clock on the sweet life she was enjoying. The smooth surface of Sandra's life began to crack one Tuesday morning. She woke up feeling weak, dizzy, and overwhelmingly sick. The expensive perfume Chief Obi had bought her the previous week now made her choke. At first, she dismissed it as a simple fever or malaria. But the nausea persisted for days. A quiet fear began to settle in her chest. She couldn't ignore the signs. That afternoon, she drove her small car to a pharmacy, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. She bought a pregnancy test, hiding it in her designer handbag as if it were contraband. Back in the solitude of her fine apartment, she went into the bathroom. She performed the test and then sat on the edge of the tub, heart hammering against her ribs, waiting. The silence in the bathroom was deafening. When she finally picked up the plastic stick, she saw the two red lines. Undeniable. No, she whispered. Her hand began to shake so violently she nearly dropped the test. This can't be happening. A wave of panic, thick and cold, washed over her. She locked the bathroom door and then the bedroom door, sinking onto the plush carpet and burying her face in her hands. She cried bitterly, the tears ruining her perfectly applied makeup. This was not part of the plan. This was not the freedom she had chased. A baby meant a permanent bond, a full stop on her flashy, independent life. Later that evening, Chief Obi called. His voice was warm and loud. "My baby, you sound weak. You sure say you day okay?" Sandra struggled to speak. She took a deep, shuddering breath. Finally, she whispered the words into the phone. "Chief, I'm pregnant." For a long moment, there was nothing but silence on the line. Sandra waited for the anger, the accusation, or the fear she expected. Instead, a shout of pure, unbridled joy erupted from the phone. "Pregnant? Ah, Sandra baby. God don't answer my prayer." Chief Obi roared with happiness. "You go born for me. Ah, my mother go dance tire." Sandra sat still, shocked by his excitement. He wasn't angry, he was planning names for the baby. To her, the pregnancy was a catastrophic mistake. To Chief Obi, it was the best news of his life. His reaction solidified her fate before she could even protest. The thought of being permanently tied to a man who wore a wrapper and smelled faintly of palm oil made her sick all over again. Her glorious, glamorous future was crashing down, replaced by motherhood and Chief Obi's endless, loud affection. She realized then that her beauty had not bought her freedom. It had sold her into a life she desperately did not want. The news reached Sandra's village like a thunderclap. Mama Sandra called, not with joy, but with tears and wailing. "Sandra, after all our suffering, this is how you repay us? With shame." Her mother's voice was broken, the sound of years of hard work being thrown away. Mr. Okafor was furious, his tired face set into a hard mask of disappointment. He came to the city apartment himself. He did not look at the expensive furniture or the new car. He only looked at his daughter. "Who is the man?" he demanded, his voice dangerously low. Sandra hesitated, shame finally finding its way past her pride. "Chief Obi," she mumbled. Her father's face fell. "That old man that wears wrapper up and down?" She could only nod. The sight of her father, the man who had sold his land for her, staring at her with such profound sadness was almost unbearable. Chief Obi arrived a few days later, dressed in his best wrapper but carrying himself with humble respect. He brought crates of drinks, a live goat, yams, and palm wine. He knelt before Sandra's parents in their village house, a rich man bowing before the poor. "I no be bad man," he said softly, his deep voice earnest. "I truly love your daughter. I want to marry her properly. Please forgive me." He spoke with such sincerity, such genuine desire to do the right thing, that it disarmed Mr. Okafor and Mama Sandra. They looked at their daughter, pregnant and silent, and realized they had no choice. Their daughter's future and their shame, depended on this man's generosity. They accepted his plea. The wedding was quiet, a simple affair that was more of a necessary transaction than a celebration. Sandra wore a heavy, expensive lace gown Chief Obi bought, but her heart was cold. She was becoming a wife, but she felt like a prisoner. When she gave birth to a baby girl, whom they named Ada, Chief Obi's happiness was boundless. He built a small, fine house for them in Asaba and moved Sandra and the baby in. Everyone in the new neighborhood said Sandra was lucky. She had youth, beauty, and a rich, devoted man who adored her and provided everything. They called her Madam Fine Woman. From the outside, her life was perfect. A new house, a car, a house help, and endless money for clothes and wigs. But Sandra never saw it that way. To her, Chief Obi was a burden she hadn't asked for. He was the anchor that had dragged her down from the glittering heights of her imagined future. His presence, his loud laughter, his simple way of dressing, it all fueled a constant, low-burning irritation. This was not a blessing, it was the beginning of her downfall, a life sentence served in luxury. Life in the fine house in Asaba was quiet, too quiet. The luxury felt stifling. Chief Obi was the perfect provider, yet Sandra's irritation only grew. His loud, hearty laughter, which was full of genuine happiness, embarrassed her in front of the house help. His simple, traditional wrappers and slippers annoyed her, especially when she had to take him to an event in the city. Worst of all was the faint, lingering smell of the palm oil he sold, which sometimes clung to his clothes and made her wrinkle her nose in distaste. Chief Obi, for his part, loved her with a soft, unwavering heart. He never shouted. He never complained. Even when Sandra disrespected him, rolling her eyes during a conversation or deliberately ignoring his gentle greetings, he would just smile sadly. "Sandra, my baby, I know say one day you go understand how much I love you," he would say, his hope tireless. But Sandra had no desire to understand. She saw herself as too young, too beautiful, and certainly too educated to be tied to a local man. She was still clinging to the ghost of the university girl who had promised herself a different, more sophisticated life. When her old university friends called, they bragged about their international vacations, their glamorous clubs, and their new, rich boyfriends. Sandra would listen, her heart burning with envy. She felt trapped, watching the life she wanted slip away from behind the guarded walls of Chief Obi's wealth. Sometimes she sat alone in the sitting room, looking at her reflection in the large mirror. She would whisper, "I'm wasting away here with a man that can't even speak good English." The truth was, she was wasting her youth on a pride that refused to see the good fortune right in front of her. Only her daughter, Ada, offered a break from her sullen mood. The child was smart, lively, and beautiful, the mirror image of her mother. But even Ada's pure, uncomplicated love wasn't enough to make Sandra feel grateful. One night, Chief Obi slept soundly beside her, his soft snoring a rhythmic, irritating sound. Sandra lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought about the flashy cars, the compliments, the feeling of absolute freedom she had once enjoyed. Now, every time Chief Obi snored, she wanted to scream. She felt stuck, caught between a wealthy reality and a prideful fantasy. As the months turned into years, Sandra's attitude hardened. She began to actively avoid her husband. She stopped cooking the meals he loved. She stopped smiling at him. She even stopped acknowledging him when he spoke kindly, treating his affection like a contagious illness. Chief Obi noticed. He could feel the ice in his own home. One evening, he sat across from her at the dinner table, the food untouched. "Sandra, you no day happy with me again," he said quietly, his eyes full of pain. "Tell me what I did wrong." She looked at him with a coldness that startled even herself. "You didn't do anything wrong, Chief. I'm just tired of this kind of life." She was tired of the slow pace, the predictability, the lack of excitement that came with stability. Chief Obi sighed, a sound of deep, weary resignation. "I give you everything I fit. You be my blessing." Sandra looked away, unable to meet his gaze, and muttered, "Then maybe your blessing is tired." That night, Chief Obi cried silently on his side of the big bed. He was a wealthy man who was respected in the community, but he could not buy the love of his own wife. Sandra, meanwhile, was scrolling through her new phone, chatting with her old friends and plotting her escape. Ada grew into a bright, playful little girl. She was the sunlight of the house, a child who loved her simple, doting father deeply. Chief Obi always made time for her. He carried her, took her to school, and bought her ice cream every weekend. He was a father first, a businessman second, and a husband last, only because his wife pushed him there. Sandra, in contrast, grew colder and more distant. She started sneaking out to visit her old friends in town. She began dressing like a single woman again, embracing the flashy style she had put away after marriage. She was actively reclaiming the identity she had lost. When Chief Obi asked her where she went, she snapped, "Must you know everything? I'm not your prisoner." Chief Obi would simply lower his eyes and reply, "Okay, my wife." He was a man drowning in his own patience, hoping the wave of her discontent would eventually pass. He didn't realize she was already swimming toward the shore. The day Sandra made her decision was quiet and uneventful. Ada was outside, happily playing with the neighbor's children under the watchful eye of the house help. The house was calm, a perfect, peaceful setting for a betrayal. Sandra went into the master bedroom and opened the large wardrobe. She began to pack her clothes, but only her fine ones. The lace gowns, the expensive shoes, the jewelry she had secretly saved, and all the designer bags. She separated these from the everyday clothes Chief Obi had bought her. She folded them quietly, methodically, into 2 large boxes. She moved with a clinical precision, her heart feeling strangely numb. There was no sadness, only a cold determination to find her lost freedom. She was cutting her losses, leaving behind the heavy life of a wife and mother for the light life of a single girl. She found a notepad and a pen and wrote a short letter. Her handwriting was neat, betraying none of the chaos in her soul. The letter was brief and self-centered. "Chief, I can't do this anymore. Please take care of Ada. I need to find myself again." She placed the note carefully on the pillow where Chief Obi rested his head. It was an abrupt, cruel goodbye, a final act of dismissal toward the man who had given her everything. She picked up the 2 boxes, pausing only for a moment to look at her sleeping child through the window. She felt a brief, sharp pang, quickly suppressed by the fierce whisper of her pride. "Don't go back. They will laugh at you." Sandra paid a roadside taxi driver to take her and her boxes into the city. She locked the door quietly behind her. She never looked back at the beautiful house, the garden, or the child playing happily in the yard. She was free. When Chief Obi returned home late that evening, the house help met him at the door, her face a mask of worry. He walked into the bedroom and saw the note. He read it once, twice, his big hands trembling. He sat on the bed where the note lay, his broad shoulders slumped, and he wept like a heartbroken child. The sound was a deep, painful wrenching that shook his entire body. Ada, confused by the strange noise, came into the room and asked, "Papa, where is Mommy?" Chief Obi pulled his daughter close, holding her tightly. He swallowed the pain and whispered, "She traveled, my daughter. She traveled far." That night, Chief Obi did not eat. He stayed outside until midnight, sitting on the veranda, staring at the silent, unforgiving stars. The woman he adored, the woman he thought was his blessing, had left him for a word she called freedom. Freedom. That was the word Sandra repeated to herself, over and over, as the taxi pulled away from Asaba and into the neon glow of the city. She used it like a comforting blanket, trying to smother the faint guilt that pricked her conscience. Life was too short to live with a man she didn't love, she rationalized. She was starting fresh. She used the money she had secretly gathered, from selling off old gold pieces and small, expensive furniture items Chief Obi had bought her, to rent a small, chic flat. It was less grand than the house in Asaba, but it felt more her own. She bought new clothes and wigs, determined to erase the memory of her marriage. She was quickly back to her old lifestyle: parties, outings, social media fame, and endless laughter. Her university friends welcomed her like a returning hero. "Sandra baby, you don't escape that local man," her friend Ngozi joked over drinks. Sandra laughed proudly, tossing her new hair. "Habeg, I suffered enough. I'm back to living my life." But beneath the laughter and the flashing camera lights, the peace was gone. Her chest often tightened at night when she thought of Ada. She missed her voice, her small, warm hands, and her daughter's unconditional, sweet laughter. But her powerful, destructive pride always whispered the same refrain: "Don't go back. You failed. They will laugh at you." Months passed like expensive wine. Sandra started dating again. The men were young, flashy, and drove cars that made noise. They called her beautiful, spent money easily, and took her to all the best spots. But none of them stayed. They wanted a beautiful distraction, not a commitment. One by one, they used her up and disappeared, leaving Sandra alone to pick up the expensive bar tab of their brief affairs. The money she had relied on began to dwindle rapidly. Rent became a problem. Bills piled up. Her friends, who used to call every day, suddenly became too busy to answer her calls or help her out. The constant stream of men vanished, taking their cash with them. Life became hard. Sandra started selling her belongings to survive. The small car, the designer bags, even the TV, everything went. She was dismantling the life she had just built, piece by expensive piece. At night, she lay on her bed in the small, empty flat, staring at the ceiling. She remembered Chief Obi's presence, the sound of his kind voice, and his promise: "Sandra, my baby, I go love you till my last breath." Now, the room was empty. There was no laughter, no child's voice, just the crushing silence of regret. The hunger was a constant, gnawing pain. It was a physical manifestation of her failure, something she had never experienced in Chief Obi's house. Her once beautiful skin, which she had spent a fortune maintaining, began to look tired and faded. The vibrant woman who once glowed with confidence now looked lost. She was forced to face the harsh reality of her choices. The life that sparkled on the outside, the freedom, the compliments, the endless outings, was completely empty. She had chased an illusion and thrown away a fortress. One evening, driven by desperation, she walked to a roadside food stall, a mama put, hoping to buy a small plate of rice with the last bit of money she had. As she sat there, eating quickly and watching the world, a young couple walked past, holding hands and laughing. For a moment, tears blurred her vision. She thought of Chief Obi and Ada again. She wondered if he had moved on. The thought made her chest burn with an unfamiliar emotion: jealousy. She had willingly abandoned him, yet the idea of him being happy without her was unbearable. That night, Sandra finally broke down. She cried until her throat was raw, whispering to herself, "I was foolish. I threw away the only person who truly loved me." The following weeks were a blur of regret and struggle. Her pride, which had been her guide for years, was finally starved into submission. She began attending a nearby church, sitting quietly at the back seat, begging God to forgive her for her arrogance and wastefulness. She wasn't praying for wealth or a new man, she was praying for a second chance. Her life had hit rock bottom, but in that despair, a small, hard seed of sincerity began to grow. She finally saw Chief Obi not as a local embarrassment, but as a man who offered peace, stability, and unconditional love. Then, one Sunday morning after the service, Sandra stood up. Her dress was faded, her slippers were worn out, and her hair was untidy, but her decision was clear. She wiped her face and walked out into the sun. She had to go back. She would return to Chief Obi's house, not as a queen, but as a beggar. She would apologize, she would serve him, and she would fight for her daughter. The walk was long, but she barely noticed the miles. She was walking toward her past, ready to accept the consequences of her foolish pride. The sun was high in the sky when Sandra arrived at Chief Obi's compound in Asaba. She stood by the gate for a long time, her heart pounding a desperate, uneven rhythm against her ribs. Fear made her legs weak. She remembered the last time she had stood here, proud, careless, and full of contempt. Now, she was a ghost of that woman. Her gown was faded, her skin looked tired, and her eyes carried the heavy weight of shame and regret. She gathered her courage, trembling, and raised her hand to knock. Before her hand made contact with the steel gate, she heard a familiar sound from within, a deep, hearty, and warm laughter. It was Chief Obi's voice. Then she heard another voice, a woman's, and a child's delighted giggle. The sounds cut through Sandra's hope like a knife. A woman's voice. Sandra froze. Her hand dropped slowly from the gate. She stood still, her breath held tight in her chest, listening to the cheerful symphony of a happy home that was no longer hers. Finally, the gate opened. Chief Obi stood there. He was smiling gently, holding a small bucket of water. He looked completely different. He was stronger, healthier, and even seemed younger. His big belly had reduced. His traditional wrapper was neat and impeccably tied. There was a look of profound peace written all over his face, a peace that had been absent when she was his wife. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of the birds and the distant traffic filled the silence. Chief Obi looked at her, his expression moving from surprise to quiet pity. Sandra dropped to her knees right there in the dust. The final fortress of her pride crumbled. "Chief, please forgive me," she choked out, tears running down her face and mixing with the dust on her cheeks. "I was blind. I didn't know what I had. I want to come home." Chief Obi's heart tightened. A part of him, the old, wounded part, wanted to help her up, to hug her and forget all the pain. But the wound she had left had taken years of quiet struggle to heal. He remained standing, his posture firm. From behind him, a woman stepped out. She was slim, elegant, and wore a simple, neat Ankara wrapper. She carried Ada on her hip. "Mummy!" Ada shouted. The little girl wriggled down and ran to Sandra, wrapping her tiny arms around her neck. Sandra broke down completely, hugging her daughter tightly, sobbing uncontrollably. "My baby mama is so sorry," she cried into Ada's hair. Chief Obi's eyes grew moist, but he held himself together. He cleared his throat and spoke, his voice soft but resolute. "Sandra, I begged you to stay. You left me when I needed you the most. You left Ada without a word." He paused, letting the silence emphasize the depth of her betrayal. "I have forgiven you, but I can't take you back." Sandra looked up at him, confused and trembling, the reality of her loss crashing down around her. "Chief, please don't do this to me. I've changed. I'll serve you. I'll love you," she pleaded, her voice desperate. Chief Obi turned his eyes toward the woman standing behind him, his new wife. "I have a wife now," he said simply. "She stood by me when everyone laughed at me. She helped me build back my life." He turned back to Sandra, his tone kind but final. "Go inside and bring her some food and small money," he told his wife. "She's still Ada's mother." The new wife nodded kindly, without a trace of malice, and went into the house. Sandra's tears flowed freely as she watched her daughter run playfully back into the compound, holding Chief Obi's strong hand. She stood outside the gate, clutching the small, white envelope his wife had given her, containing a little cash. She felt the full, crushing weight of her choices. As the heavy gate closed, sealing her out of the life she had once owned, Sandra whispered through her tears, "I lost everything because of pride." That night, she slept in a small, cheap lodge near the park. For the first time in years, she prayed sincerely. "God," she said quietly, "thank you for opening my eyes before it was too late. Even if I can't go back, please give me strength to start again." She wiped her face and looked through the window at the distant, shining stars. They were silent, but they seemed to remind her that while her former life was gone, her true self, the ambitious, intelligent girl from the village, could still rise again. Her beauty and pleasure had faded, but the hard-won lesson about character and true love would last forever. She had paid the bitter price of her pride, and now she had to live with the debt.